We no longer have, or less and less, these binary logic, predetermined sexual roles. We rediscover, recreate, repeat, reconstruct, invent our identities. My only problem is, what's so revolutionary about it?
I get a lot of comments on this channel from people telling me, Marceline, you can't just tell people they can be whatever they want to be. That's not true. And these comments are right. There's lots of things in this world you can't be. For example, you cannot be an attack helicopter. That's not possible. And unfortunately, you cannot be a unicorn as much as you may wish that you could. However, facts are facts, and the facts don't care about your feelings. And the facts are, we have a lot more agency in who we want to be in this world than we are told by society. Not only can we transgress social boundaries of what is or is not accepted or expected of us, but thanks to modern medicine and science, we can also transgress biological boundaries as well. You could choose to look like this, or you could choose to look like this, or neither, or both. You could refer to yourself as a cat girl and call yourself meow and meow instead of she and her, or you could only use language that has a historical precedence in being societally acceptable for whatever society says is right for you. The world is your sequential hermaphroditist oyster baby. The only question left is who do you want to be? First things first, in this character creation menu, we need to talk about the lore of the world that the character lives in. Now, this world is called Earth. And in the world of Earth, the question could be raised that we are not, in fact, totally free to even know what sort of character we might even want to create in the first place. So are we free to choose who we want to be in this world? And can we even know who we want to be in this world? The Psychic Life of Power by Judith Butler explores the question, what does it look like to create the self when there is a regime of power invested in limiting that agency? We are used to thinking of power as what presses on the subject from the outside, as what subordinates, sets underneath, and relegates to a lower order. But if, following Foucault, we understand power as forming the subject as well, as providing the very condition of its existence and the trajectory of its desire, then power is not simply what we oppose, but also, in a strong sense, what we depend on for our existence. Judith Butler mentions survival as a potential way in which the self cannot be realized. If survival hinges on being a certain way, then you will be inclined to formulate your concept of self in line with the way that is necessary for survival. Likewise, humiliation, familial and societal acceptance, and economic success and well-being can all factor into our formation of self. Essentially, it's impossible for us living in the world we live in to actually imagine who we would be free from the constraints of power, because we live in a world full of constraints on the self, whether physical or psychical, social or personal. We can only attempt to imagine what such a world could look like. In The Left Hand of Darkness, Ursula Le Guin imagines a world where the predominant humanoid species are both male and female, and the implications of having a species free from our world's understanding of sex and gender. This species Ursula Le Guin has created are called the Gathenians, and they live on the planet of winter. The Gathenians can become either male or female for the purposes of sex or reproduction and switch between these two sexes. This dissolution of gender difference has a dramatic effect on Gathenian society. A child has no psychosexual relationship to his mother and father. There is no myth of Oedipus on winter. There is no unconsenting sex, no. As with most mammals other than man, coitus can be performed only by mutual invitation and consent, Otherwise, it is not possible. There is no division of humanity into strong and weak halves, protective, protected, dominant, submissive, owner, chattel, active, passive. In fact, the whole tendency to dualism that pervades human thinking may be found to be lessened or changed on winter. One way in which we experience power in this world is through language. Language imposes restrictions on the ways we discuss gender and sexuality. And while the modern LGBTQ+ movement is trying to overcome some of these restrictions in English, in other parts of the world, these restrictions have never even existed to begin with. In Hungarian, there is no grammatical gender, no she or he. But while Hungarians have only ever known a language free of gender, even the intelligent Google cannot cope with such a gender-free world. And if you ask it to translate Hungarian, it will simply choose gendered pronouns for you. She is beautiful. He is clever. He reads. She washes the dishes. He builds. She sews. He teaches, she cooks. He's researching, she is raising a child. He plays music, she's a cleaner. He is a politician, he makes a lot of money. She is baking a cake, he's a professor, she's an assistant. He is Google, she is sexist as fuck. All that to say, unless one of you was raised by Athenians, you simply will not be able to authentically examine who you want to be in this world, free from the influence of powers not of your creation. So whoever you create your character to be, it will be either in line with or dissident to the systems of power you were raised by. Now, speaking of the systems of power that be, I'm a philosophy student trying to do the video essayist thing, and while you have no obligations to support me making a career on the internet for myself, because I live in a capitalist system, unless you support me monetarily, or I somehow manage to corporatize this channel, I won't be able to turn this into a career. I'd personally much prefer the former, and I currently am way too small of a creator to manage the latter. So if you'd like to support me on Patreon, that would be really cool. I even write my own scripts. So we've established that changing your presets in this world can be, and likely is, depending on where you live, a decision made under duress. But is it even possible to change the self? And should you? When you are born, it's like selecting the randomized option in a video game selection screen. Except in this case, that randomized selection will be drawn from a pre-existing pool of genetic material given by your parents. Now, while it may seem that the way that you were born is governed by the laws of nature and only nature, and that there's no way to diverge from that path, in short, yes, you can change yourself. I personally have changed the body that I was born into, the legality in which that body is monitored bureaucratically speaking, and my doxastic reality, or the way that I view the world. And if you watched my last video, you'll know that my starting preset was very different to this one. So yes, you can change yourself, but should you? There's a religious argument that you should not change the way that you were born at all. And this is kind of just an extension of what I call the common sense problem, which I want to talk about more in a future video. But there's nothing in the Bible that says you can't change yourself, except for a somewhat confusing period-specific verse about not getting tattoos, and some also weird period-specific, hard-to-interpret verses about how you should dress. But even if you do believe in the Bible, which I don't personally, there still isn't anything solid in there saying that you can't change the way that you are. And that verse about being beautifully and wonderfully made doesn't negate that either. I'm not religious, and I don't agree with those perspectives, but I totally respect an individual's right to cite religion as their personal reason to stay as close as they possibly can to the default version of themselves. But if you are using the religious excuse to not be who you want to be in this world, just understand that you're probably doing that more out of a kind of hegemonic sense of what you think the world should be, as opposed to what your religious text says. There's also a capitalistic argument against evolution of self, and frankly, I think there's some merit to this one. Capitalism wants you to change your body because capitalism can profit off of your desire to change. Historically speaking, capitalism went more down the route of you should change your body to conform. You should shave your body if you're a woman because capitalism makes lots of money off of razors and because that's what men want you to do. These days, capitalism has also learned to profit off of your desire for individuality. So if you want to dye your hair, get piercings or tattoos, if you identify with a certain subgroup, if you don't like the body that you're in, if you feel insecure about your appearance, these are all things that capitalism can profit from. Even anti-capitalist groups and aesthetics can be absorbed, packaged, and resold within capitalism. But this kind of argument really just rehashes the whole, oh, you don't like capitalism, yet you have a phone, curious argument, which should really just be its own logical fallacy at this point. As much as I love my capitalism is a choice t-shirt I'm wearing right now, thank you, Hassan, we don't individually, at this moment in time, choose the world we're born into. We can collectively choose to change it, but right now that world is capitalism. And choosing not to be yourself in protest to capitalism monetizing your agency and becoming who you want to be is really fucking stupid. And even in a world without profit motive, people would obviously still want to become certain versions of themselves that make them happy. Because duh. I'm all for critiquing the plastic surgery industry and industries that sell us bodily modification in dark ways in this pursuit of perfection and idealized selves. I keep seeing ads for hormonal modification products and other things that are a little bit less nefarious, like the multivitamins world, which is a bit dubious, and supplements and that sort of thing. But also, don't not dye your hair just because it's going to cost you money, and that's feeding into capitalism. Next up, I want to address the nature-based argument. And I just want to say that nature is wonderful. I love nature, and celebrating the way that you were born is a wonderful thing. But if your argument is just love yourself the way that you are and don't change yourself ever in any way, that's fine if that's what you want for yourself, but that's not a legitimate argument. I got an enormous amount of transphobia on Threads recently, and one guy was like, I learned to be okay with the fact that I've naturally gone bald, so trans people can accept the bodies they were born into too. And that's just really fucking stupid. I absolutely support not changing yourself at all if that's what you want, and I absolutely support loving your natural self. But for those of us who do want to evolve our self-concept and change our bodies, we're not going to be barred from self-realization because Billy with no profile photo accepted his baldness. Which, by the way, Billy, if you ever change your mind, there's some great gender-affirming care options out there for dudes just like you. This line of argument can also be extended to broader thoughts on transhumanism. Transhumanism is essentially the evolution of the human form, specifically involving scientific advancement. Strictly speaking, all gender-affirming care could be considered transhumanist. Never before in history have we had the possibility to change our secondary sex or alter our hormone production outside of minor dietary and physical activity controls. I'm going to talk more about biohacking in part 2, but I just want to say that I think a lot of the arguments against transhumanism really boil down to religious ones and nature ones, which I've sort of already addressed. God made us the way that we are, we shouldn't change ourselves. There's obviously concerns about how little we understand about new groundbreaking science and technology and the possible risks of that. I don't personally believe in God, so I'm not personally concerned about preserving myself the way God made me. And as for scientific technology concerns, I kind of get that up until a point. Obviously, it's worth being really careful about new science as it concerns changes made to the human body. But ultimately, this all comes down to bodily autonomy to me. If people want to do weird, new experimental things on their body, that's up to them. And as long as they're not hurting anybody, then go for it. We don't actually live in the world of Black Mirror. All technology isn't inherently evil. I find that people have a huge double standard for what they think is okay in terms of scientific advancement for disabled people, but then when it comes to the rest of society, changing your body is really bad, and using scientific stuff to alter the self is really bad. People should have bodily autonomy, yes, even if it means in rare cases hurting themselves or regretting their actions. And culture war politics aside, I find transhumanism really exciting, and I'm excited to see where it leads, even if that ends up being nowhere. All that to say, change your damn body if you want to. It's yours, life is short, and if you can do something to love the skin you're in more, then fucking do it. But I know it's not exactly that simple. Inside our carbon capitalist episteme, my trans identity must be fabricated from a much lower tech makeshift arrangement. If we had expended as much energy trying to find out how to communicate with trees as we have devoted to the extraction and transformation of petroleum, perhaps we'd be capable of lighting up a city by photosynthesis or feeling vegetal sap run in our veins. But our Western civilization has specialized in capital and domination, in carbon energy and extractivism, in taxonomy and identification, not in cooperation or transformation. I'm reading the script and it just says, ignore all this shit below and just ad-lib, girl. This was kinda a messy script, girl. So, you know what? That's just what we're gonna do, okay? Part 1 was scripted and professional and put together. You can't expect me to have multiple parts of a video put together and scripted and intelligent sounding. Now, Slavoj Žižek was recently discussing that, to him, transition is not inherently revolutionary.
The main topic of big left liberal media, like New York Times and so on, what to do with transgender toilets. What made me a little bit suspicious is that all of them, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, name them, all of them fanatically, even the worst capitalists, they all fully supported it. I mean, we should accept it, yes, of course, but that's another topic. Transgender, Me Too. But they are not, I claim, inherently revolutionary.
And I just have to say that I very much disagree. I think that choosing to be who you want to be in a world that tells you not to be that person is incredibly revolutionary. I think it's one of the most revolutionary things a human being can do, is to say, yes, I was born into a world with this very specific set of rules around what I can and cannot do, and I'm choosing to not follow those rules. It's revolutionary on a personal level, but it's also revolutionary on a societal level, because it helps all of us understand that we don't have to necessarily listen to what people in power have told us about who we're allowed to be. We're allowed to just be who we want to be, potentially and often in spite of what those in power would wish. So I think that transition is very revolutionary. I do not, however, think it is the most revolutionary thing by any means. As part of my university, I've been reading a lot of Adolf Reed recently, and Adolf Reed has some very problematic views on trans people, but fundamentally one of his political perspectives is that the only thing that we should really be fighting for, the thing that we should be fighting for the most, is a more egalitarian society in terms of wealth inequality, basically moving in a more kind of communistic and a less capitalist direction with society. And he believes that that is far more important than, fighting for racial equality or fighting for gender equality. I don't think that's how it works, and I think fighting for racial and gender equality is really important, and I think fighting for trans rights is really important. However, I do agree with some of the bedrock of his philosophy, which is that there are more revolutionary things in the world than being yourself. For example, Not everyone in the world we live in can even be themselves. Not everyone in the world has, the access to even be able to choose themselves. Like I mentioned in part 1 of this video, if you live in a world where you might be killed for being yourself, then you can't even engage with the question of, am I this thing? Because that thing is simply not allowed. It's not an option for you. So a lot of times there's economic barriers to being who you want to be in this world, even in the Western world. And I don't just mean in relation to how expensive medical transition can be for trans people. Like, that is obviously something that can be massively expensive. But even other members of the queer community might find that they could risk homelessness for being who they want to be, that they could risk losing their job for being who they want to be. So being who you want to be, even in a supposedly liberal society, is not always something that is even an option. There are so many barriers to this. And even in making this video, I had complicated feelings about the fact that I've had a lot of privilege in being able to become who I want to be. And I often position this as, oh, this was a really hard decision for me to make because I faced rejection from my family and from my society. And I had to, deal with social ostracization and mean comments on the tube. And that's real, and that's difficult, and it has been hard, and even my medical transition has been difficult in many ways. But I've been able to do it, and even the fact that I've been able to do it, it makes me enormously privileged. I'm not trying to engage the Trauma Olympics by saying all of this. Fundamentally, I don't think the Trauma Olympics are very helpful. We can fight for trans rights while also fighting wealth inequality. We can care about people's individual freedoms and the queer community and queer rights while still acknowledging that queer people in Palestine deserve the right to live. We can and should care about multiple different issues, but sometimes it is important to focus our attention and to focus on things that are more important. And I do think that there are things that in this world that are more important. Like the right to live is fundamentally, I think, more important to me than the right to live authentically, as weird as it is to draw a hierarchy there. My fight for us all to be able to customize our characters is a fight that cannot be won or accomplished until everyone has the ability to even live and the ability to even ask the question, who do I want to be in this world? Anyway, I am currently celebrating 2 years in transition. My grandma doesn't really understand the whole trans thing, so she always refers to my transition as my transcendence. And I have to say, I just really think that's the most beautiful thing. And I feel like I identify with my transcendence more than I identify with my transition. In many ways, I feel that transcendence is actually more accurate than transition. Transition implies a point A to a point B, whereas for me personally, my transcendence has been about transcending the limited perspective of the world that I was born into. It's been about transcending the epistemology of sex and gender that was forced on me. It's been about actively choosing who I want to be in this world rather than letting that simply be assigned to me. So it's been 2 years of transcendence, baby. And I'm really, really, really grateful. 2 years ago, I started rubbing estradiol 0.06% gel onto my body, and I watched things inside me and outside me begin to shift. When I started hormones, it was originally a decision made because I started to have a lot of anxiety about the late stages of male puberty, and I was worried about dealing with hair loss, and I was just starting to realize that I didn't really want to get older as a man. And this realization was what caused me to start monotherapy with estrogen. I am currently on a much higher dose of estrogen, and I'm still on estrogen monotherapy. I do also take progesterone. The way that I am now taking estradiol gel is a way that is meant to suppress my testosterone on its own. So that's where I'm at with my character customization 2 years in. I am loving the body that I live in. I am loving the life that I have chosen for myself, and I'm feeling really, really good. The only part of my character customization to me that is frustrating in this current body and in this current world is the way that society treats me. I feel really frustrated because conversations surrounding transition and surrounding, my decision to modify my body and customize my body are all still so grounded in what I view as a quite traditional perspective on sex and gender, and even on like trans theory and gender theory. Fundamentally, to me, testosterone and estrogen are drugs. They are drugs that change your body. When I view my transition, I often view it as simply biohacking. It was a decision to create a body that I was happier with and more excited by. It was a decision to modify my biology using drugs. Biohacking is a term that I see thrown around a lot these days, and it can kind of often be, in my opinion, slightly misused to refer to like diet culture, and it's been very like absorbed into like the capitalist health world and that kind of thing. But to me, biohacking just means that you are trying to change your body using basically medicine or yes, in some cases food, but essentially you're trying to hack your biology. Throughout a lot of our history, we have been very limited by human biology, and a lot of people think that we still should be. But the fact of the matter is, we do have the ability to mess with our biology these days. That is something that I personally am really excited by, and my ability to biohack my body into something much more feminine has been the absolute greatest joy of my life. So, technically speaking, estrogen and testosterone have heavy associations with the female and male sex, respectively. However, at the end of the day, as drugs that you consume, they are just drugs. You can take estrogen because you want better skin, longer eyelashes, thicker lips. You could take testosterone because you want, increased muscle growth. Now, obviously, I'm not a medical professional, so when I talk about these things quite casually, I do so because I have quite a casual perspective on these things. However, taking drugs is a big deal, and you should do your own research, and I am not a doctor. I did not study biology, so obviously I'm not trying to condone medical processes that could potentially be harmful for you. But fundamentally, when it comes to character customization, anybody can take estrogen or testosterone for whatever reason they want to, regardless of gender. Now, estrogen and testosterone can also be modified. One of the things I get asked a lot on this channel is people asking me, how can you transition without breast growth? And I have mentioned this in the past, but I highly encourage you to look into relaxafine. Relaxafine is a selective estrogen receptor modifier, also known as a SERM, and SERMs let you modify estrogen, and I believe there are also some for testosterone, but I don't know as much about that for obvious reasons. And within estrogen, you can take a drug called relaxafine, which means that the estrogen does not go to your breasts, and so you will have significantly less, if any, breast development by taking relaxafine. Relaxafine can also be known to lessen some of the feminizing effects of estrogen, so just do some research into that. I also think it's not the easiest drug in the world to get. Unfortunately, a lot of drugs surrounding hormonal regulation are produced for the purposes of helping cancer patients, and so they are simply not made for trans bodies. And a lot of the challenge we have, I say we as people who want to explore our biology, we have to look to the cancer pharmacological industry, and that's a challenge. Now, taking gender-specific drugs is obviously not the only way to biohack. A couple years ago, I was listening to this podcast called Biohacking for Sex by Inner Ho Uprising, and I highly recommend it. It was really interesting, but it explored some of the ways that people biohack in relation to sexuality. There are people who are installing vibrators into pleasurable points in the body, trying to not get demonetized here. Some of which have like remote controls attached or will activate based on like where you are in relation to a partner. There are also some fun and fantastical ways that you can change your body, including getting permanently pointed ears and getting a split tongue. And these are things that some people might find a little bit more like freaky, but fundamentally, to me, in my opinion, if that's something that you want to do for yourself, then you should do it. You don't need to have a gender-based justification or like a health-based justification. If you want to have pointy ears, you can actually just go and make that happen for yourself. I think it's very punk rebelling from the aesthetic of the human experience itself. There's also a misconception about what is our natural state and what is, kind of a process of habit or a process of getting older. Like, for instance, with voices, we tend to think of voices as being this thing that we're born with, but we're not actually born with one voice. Like, our voice is a habit. It's a habit that is affected by, the vocal cords that we have, but our voices are basically just one muscle in the body that can be modified and trained and stretched and evolved and pulled in different directions. I have been told a lot as an insult that, well, you're only the way that you are thanks to modern science and plastic surgery. And to me, that's not an insult. To me, that's something that's really exciting, because I don't believe in the superiority of nature. I don't believe, oh, this is the way I was born, therefore it's better than the way that you are. I don't believe in that. And I also don't believe that making use of modern science and technology and even plastic surgery are inherently bad or wrong or evil things. So for me personally, the fact that I am the way that I am today because of science, how cool is that, in my opinion? I'm like, wow, science is so cool, and I'm really grateful that modern science has enabled me to be who I want to be.
I can live another life, spend another time. I can spit another rhyme on Gaia. Guns and wars won't stop the fight.
Alrighty, your character has been created. Now all you need to do is decide on a name, and your adventure is ready to begin. This video was originally planned to just be like my 2-year transition kind of celebration video and talking about how I feel, because I've done these sort of like updates on transition, but I am trying to, and I'm passionate about creating content that does not just revolve around me and my story. But I know a lot of people follow me for that and want to hear my story, and I'm happy to share it. I just don't want it to all be about that, so I decided to do something a little bit different with this video. And in general, I don't want to be like only a trans content creator. I don't want to only talk about gender. I want to talk about so many things. So thank you for coming along on the journey that this video was semi-scripted, semi-unscripted, and bouncing around a lot of different ideas. But I hope you liked it. If you did like it, feel free to give it a thumbs up down below, and I hope to see you around this year. I have a few things planned, but I'm also studying and just trying to do all the things as per usual. Thank you to all of my patrons who made this video a possibility. You guys are wonderful, especially Andromeda Turnbull. You are an angel. And thank you for putting up with me. Alrighty, I have an essay to submit now about common sense and doxastic responsibility. Don't know why I signed up for this master's. Studying it's hard. It's hard work. Nobody told me masters were hard, so anyway, I'm gonna go submit that now. Bye.
Take me away. I'm sick of mildew. I'm sick of all of these humans telling me what to do. They make you stupid, but we are funny, bro. Remember your cosmic roots. Marceline, I'm coming to get you, girl. We're flying. Let's catch a ride on Lady Unicorn.